So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod, and welcome to the shorter quick-fire questions version of the podcast. So if you haven't already listened to the full episode with Debbie and I, please do go and do so. It should be around my head somewhere out now. If you can find the link on YouTube, or you can kind of scroll through Spotify or however you're listening to this podcast. So Debbie is an Australian who spent some time, or quite a lot of time, living in London, and has now moved back to Australia. And I guess the first question I always ask my guests, Debbie, is, where is the third place you ever lived?
Well, I mean, London's the only other place I've ever lived, so I would have to say, like, southwest London is definitely...
Is there a specific kind of tube stop?
I lived in Southfields in London for a really long time when I was there. Southfields, not many people know where it is, but it's actually where the Wimbledon Tennis Championships is held, so it's in a beautiful part of London.
Wonderful. My next question is, what's your favourite international food?
This is really hard because there's so many, and it changes all of the time depending on where I've been and what I've done. I think from like an overall like cuisine perspective, like Italian is definitely up there. I always, never go wrong when you're in Italy. It doesn't matter what you eat; it's always incredible. But then I've had some great meals in like Copenhagen and New York and then, Vietnam and other places like that as well. But from an overarching, you can't go wrong with, great pasta in Italy and great gelato in Italy for sure.
Yeah, I second that opinion. What's your favourite international tradition?
Do you know what? It's, from what we've been talking about actually, because it's on at the moment as well, is, I love Wimbledon and I love like the British summertime, and I was, lucky enough, one, because I lived almost next door to where it's held, being able to go like a lot of times throughout the time that I lived in London, and being part of the queue, and I guess that's like a great British pastime and tradition, is just being in a queue anyway, but being in like the queue, for Wimbledon and everything that goes along with that, and the strawberries and cream, and the excitement of being at Wimbledon and one of like the biggest sporting events in the world. Yeah, definitely a lot of fun.
What's your favorite thing about living abroad?
The people. I think that's my most favorite thing, is getting to know lots of people from lots of different walks of life and from lots of different places, and really getting to understand and explore new cultures through the people that I've met in my travels. I think that's sort of the number one, best thing about living abroad, is all the different people that you meet, different walks of life. It's, you can't read about it in a book. Getting to experience it firsthand with locals is key.
Yeah, and no two experiences are the same, right? So you have to make your own.
Exactly. Yeah, I've learned a lot of traditions, which is great.
And what's your best homesickness remedy?
Music, 100% hands down music, and then closely followed by like food from home. But yeah, definitely listening to favorite like bands and songs. For me, it's a lot of EXS and Powderfinger and John Farnham for the Aussies out there. That was like a big part of homesickness for me.
I'm quite ignorant with Australian music. Wolfmother is probably the best band I know from Australia. They're pretty good. What's the hardest thing about living abroad?
Definitely being away from family and friends, especially coming from Australia to the UK. It's such a long way. You just can't pop back for the weekend, like what a lot of my European friends would do that were living in London. So I mean, being a long way from home. And I find that the reverse now as well, being in Australia, being a long way from London and my friends that, became like family over there is quite difficult as well. But yeah, I think the distance of being away from family and friends is definitely the hardest thing.
With the time zone makes a difference as well for you, because it's just, you've got to really try and plan your calls with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not easy, but manageable. But yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to navigate.
And then what's the best phrase you've learned since moving away from Australia? So a kind of British phrase you might have picked up on.
Do you know, and it's probably a bit of a cliche, but actually keep calm and carry on. And I have it on the mug. At home, someone gave it to me. I think it's a Secret Santa one year as well. But I think it just really summarizes, especially when like things are not going so well, actually just to like keep calm and, and actually carry on. And I think that was, it is a good way of life, and it's a good way of thinking about things as well, even when there's lots of other stuff happening. It's just to like keep going and keep doing what you're doing. So yeah, probably like, next to like mind the gap, keep calm and carry on. It's probably like, a bit cliched, but actually it's a good one. So one that's quite meaningful.
What's your best way of making new friends?
Really, luckily, a lot of my friendships when I was living overseas came from work, and that was either from like people like from Brits who I worked with, or other expats from different countries all around the world who were in similar situations to me. So I was really lucky to work for some companies where there was lots of people in similar boat to me, and therefore things became quite social, and being able to go out and travel, or go to the pub or restaurants or concerts with colleagues, and those colleagues then turn into friends. That was really fortunate position to be in.
That's good. That's a great bit of advice. What's your favourite thing to do in London when you're living there?
Oh my goodness, hard one again. There's so many things. I think depending on the time of year, in summer, being outside in a beer garden with friends, always a lot of fun, or in the Wimbledon queue. In winter, there was nothing better than the Christmas lights and going to Christmas markets. And when it snowed, obviously, because I'm Australian, every time like there was a single snowflake that would fall, getting excited about that. But it was definitely just leading into whatever was happening at, that time of the year, and like taking advantage of all the great stuff that comes throughout the different seasons in the UK, and all the different cultural events and other events that happen. A lot of fun.
That's great. And my last question is, what's your best expat life hack?
For me, it was always have Vegemite. I traveled, so that I always had that piece of home. I think that's probably, as an Australian overseas, I think that's probably the best hack, is to always have a jar or a tube of Vegemite with you. You can never go wrong.
And that's for a sponsorship for a few times on this podcast. Vegemite's quite a popular thing. I've never had it, and I've never had Marmite actually. It's not really my thing. So I don't know if it's the same in Australia. Is it a love-hate thing, or does everyone just like Vegemite in Australia?
Yeah, Marmite's not really a thing here. I don't even know if you can buy it in Australia. You probably can, but it's definitely not the same as like in the UK from a love it or hate it perspective.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Debbie, for your time and sharing your incredible experiences and stories with me and with all people listening or watching the podcast. And hopefully you have enjoyed it, and you've learned something new, or got some great inspiration from Debbie and her time living abroad, and you'll make your journey, no matter where you are, start or during it, or even if you finished it and looking for some nostalgia, that you've enjoyed the podcast. And we'll see you next time for the Expat Pod.